You know who else turns out to be an epidemiologist? It's Laura Ingraham.
Oh, yes, I heard.
What is going on at Fox where they are just like completely determined? They must have had a memo that they're pointing out, and they must be pissed at this point now because it's reported that Don Jr. has bought a big part of OANN, OANN, and basically they're coming for Fox. I mean, I don't know if they bought this as a way of like threatening Fox. And so now you got Laura Ingraham and Tucker Carlson out there basically saying like, we got to open up. There's no evidence that staying away from each other in any way lessens the contagious quality of this pandemic. This is really, here's Laura Ingraham. This is really impressive. It's really impressive that you could say this and actually just like, I don't know, I think she has kids, right? Like, it's just unbelievable.
Intuitively, I think it probably seemed like social distancing would be necessary. There was no real scientific basis for believing that, since it never been studied. And as one infectious disease doc told me last week, trying to stop this virus with social distancing is like trying to drive a nail through Jell-O. Viruses spread. That's what they do. They often weaken as they go. And if it's like SARS, we hope it is, it'll eventually burn out, as SARS did. An observational study by a researcher at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, not yet peer-reviewed, examined whether stay-at-home orders actually prevented deaths in Western Europe. Comparing the trajectory of the epidemic before and after the lockdown, we find no evidence of any discontinuity in the growth rate, doubling time, and reproduction number trends. We provide estimates of the death toll in the absence of any lockdown policies and show that these strategies might not have saved any life in Western Europe. Well, if true, I say if, that would be stunning. And the author does echo the sentiments of Nobel laureate Michael Levitt of Stanford University.
So this guy from the Oceanographic Institute did his own study that came out with, non-peer reviewed, that it might not have saved any lives. It might not have. And the idea that distancing yourself from other people, like, we also have like the opposite. Let's say, like, we do know that the hot spots are in this country, whether we're talking about cities or actually just locations, are the most dense, right? Like a meat processing plant, or New York City, or, you know, the subway system, where people are in close proximity to each other. There's more activity, there's more problems. And that in New York, after social distancing, we're starting to see a drop in the rate of new infections, a drop in the rate of new deaths. Now, there's not been a study of that, as far as I know, but it's quite clear what's happening.
Sam,
and you know what? If
logic.
she is so confident with this, go into work.
Yeah.
Take your kid to school, Laura. Like, prove us all wrong. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I think we have to like pull back the curtain a little bit, because this is clearly not about truth. You know, they've gone past the phase of acknowledging that the pandemic existed. You know, they suspended Kennedy, and they suspended, I forgot who the other person was. They got rid of what's her name, Trish Regan, because they were in denial over the pandemic. But now we're at the point
where they
where
also unjustly got rid of Diamond and Silk.
Oh, yes.
We're on to something with this whole 5G thing.
And they were just on Fox Nation. They weren't even on the big channel. But ultimately, I think the issue that they're facing is advertising revenue. Advertising revenue is down everywhere. And so I don't even think this is coming down to politics and winning certain, you know, in a sense is winning certain states over, because if you can pressure, you know, if the right wing can pressure their lawmakers to open up their state, that's good for business and that's good for advertising. I think fundamentally this is now a business decision, because there's no way you let that kind of conversation on air at this point. Certainly
it is being pushed by business. I guess maybe their perspective is this, because from my perspective, it's like, okay, you're going to push everybody out the door and they're all going to go back to the stores. they're all not going to, because the vast majority of Americans are like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, why would I go back out to the store right now? I'm not going to do that. But what you're going to do is you're going to, these right wingers are not going to have to pay out their unemployment insurance. They're not, small businesses are going to have to pay their rent to the big real estate companies because they don't have a shutdown order. They have no excuse. There's going to be no sort of like force majeure type of situation. So everybody's going to have to pay, and that's going to be fine. But then 6 weeks later, your death tolls are going to go up. And maybe they're just thinking like, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to basically pump the brakes, release the brakes.
Yes.
Keep people off the unemployment rolls. Right. Make sure that people have to pay their rent. Cut back on the forbearance on mortgages. And then pump the brakes. And then this is the way they're going to do it. And she's just basically being a handmaiden to say, like, we're going to push the amount of deaths that we can. We're going to get right up to the line. We're going to go over 3,000. Then we're going to pull back. And then we're going to go over 3,000. We're going to pull back. And we're going to keep doing that until enough people die and enough people get infected that Laura Ingraham, could go outside and go to the supermarket. And boom, that's the end of the story. So it's just like, like, I don't know if it's going to get them advertising, but maybe it's going to get them support from the places. Maybe it's, big real estate or whatever it is. It's going to get paid because we don't have the government basically saying you got to stay at home. But I suspect that's going to change in 6 weeks.
That's the study. The study that they do know is what happens when you have mini crises and big crises. And if you have, this is a big crisis, but if you study it out so that, okay, some people will, because they have savings, because they're still on the payroll, whatever it is, some people will be able to pay their rent, right? And then they can go back to work. But then there's going to be evictions. And, at the end of the day, that's great for big business. That's great for disaster capitalists. You have a lot of we already have a small business issue in New York City, which, of course, has been hit in ways that the rest of the country has not. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, that is their study that they're looking at. How can we turn this into the most profitable scenario for the long run for all of these vulture capitalists to swoop in, to buy up distressed assets, to have a clearinghouse so we can pump up the real estate again. Don't forget, right after 9/11 in New York, biggest growth period.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying with the structural change that's happening with the Republicans, just the tremendous amount of money that they've pumped into the financial markets and to everywhere else. Let's go to the phones.